My sister stole my handmade wedding dress for her bachelorette party. Then my family told me to forgive her until her fiancé found out everything. My sister wanted to wear my wedding dress. Not just any wedding dress, one I had handmade myself. Over a year of labor, of heart. I told her no, and so she stole it. Now that it's ruined, my entire family is telling me to just forgive her, because that's what sisters do. But this was the final straw. I'm Ava. I'm 30 years old, and not too long ago, I married the love of my life. My amazing husband, Daniel, who's 32. That day should have been perfect. Magical. A memory I'd treasure forever. But instead, it was a complete nightmare. And all because of my younger sister, Clara. She's 28. Let me give you a little background, because the story doesn't start on my wedding day. No, this is a tale built on years of cracks and fractures, of one-sided apologies and constant boundary crossing. Growing up, Clara always had this habit. She'd take my clothes, my makeup, anything she wanted without ever asking. Sometimes I get them back, stained or broken. Other times I never saw them again. And every single time my parents brush it off. That's what sisters do, they'd say. Be generous. Learn to share. When I got my first job at 16, Clara found a new thing to take, my money. She'd borrow, promise to pay me back, then conveniently forget. Again, my parents excused it. She's still in school, they'd say. She needs help. But what about me? That pattern never stopped. Not even in adulthood. Clara continued to treat my belongings like a free-for-all. And me? I became the difficult one. The one who didn't know how to let things go. All for simply setting boundaries. My parents? They always played favorites. When Clara dropped out of college, they paid her rent. When she couldn't hold a job, they covered her bills. But when I worked 3 jobs to pay for school, I was told I was obsessed with money. Selfish, even, for not giving Clara cash when she asked. Still, despite everything, I wanted to believe she'd grow up. That one day, she'd understand. I couldn't have been more wrong. I've always had a passion for sewing. My hands find peace in fabric, in thread. So when Daniel proposed, I made a decision. I would create my own wedding dress. Not just sew it, but design every detail from scratch. It became my sanctuary. For over a year, I poured myself into it, sketching late at night, stitching through weekends, redoing lacework until my fingers bled. The final result? A vintage-inspired masterpiece, adorned with delicate beadwork and hand-stitched lace. It wasn't just a dress. It was a reflection of who I was, my love, my commitment, my story. And then, just 2 months before my wedding, Clara got engaged to her boyfriend of 6 months. Despite everything, I was happy for her. I really was. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment she started taking responsibility. Then she asked if she could wear my wedding dress for her wedding, which she planned just 3 weeks after mine. I was stunned. I mean, how could I even explain it to her? That this dress wasn't just an outfit. It was a part of me? I tried to be kind. I gently told her no. Explained how deeply personal the dress was. How I had designed every detail for myself. And it wasn't something I could just hand over. But I wasn't cold. I even offered to help her find or make her own dress. I thought she understood. She nodded, said okay, and changed the subject. I thought that was the end of it. But I didn't know. Clara doesn't take no as an answer. The night before my wedding, I stayed at my parents' house, as tradition. My dress was carefully packed and hanging in my childhood closet, zipped into a garment bag like a sacred treasure. When I woke up that morning, the morning I was supposed to walk into the next chapter of my life, I went to check on the dress. It was gone. Panic. That's the only word that fits how I felt in that moment. I tore through the room, heart pounding, every corner of the closet yanked open, every drawer checked, though I already knew the truth. My wedding dress, my handmade, one-of-a-kind dress, was gone. I ran downstairs in a frenzy, demanding to know if anyone had seen it. My mom looked up from her coffee like nothing was wrong and said, "Oh, Clara came by early this morning to try it on. She'll bring it back soon." To try it on? My mind couldn't even process it. Who tries on someone's wedding dress the morning of their wedding? I called Clara. No answer. I texted again and again. Nothing. Time was ticking. The hours I'd planned to spend relaxing, getting ready with my closest friends, savoring the moment, gone. Instead, I was pacing, crying, shaking, watching the minutes slip away. Then, 90 minutes before the ceremony, Clara finally showed up. She strolled in, holding the dress in her arms, looking vaguely sheepish. But the moment I laid eyes on it, my breath caught in my throat. It was ruined. There was a dark red wine stain trailing down the front. The hem torn, beads missing, scattered like breadcrumbs from a disaster. lace that had taken me hours to hand-stitch, ripped. She looked me in the eye and confessed. She had worn it to her bachelorette party the night before. Her bachelorette party. I felt my knees go weak. I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My mother hovered awkwardly. Maybe we could spot clean it, she said. It's not that bad. My father? He told me I was overreacting, that it was just a dress. But it wasn't. It was my dress, my dream, my work, my heart stitched into every seam. In the end, I had no choice but to wear a backup dress I had bought, just in case some off-the-rack thing. It was pretty sure, but it wasn't mine. And as I stood there at the altar, smiling for photos, saying my vows, trying desperately to stay present, all I could feel was grief. During what should have been the happiest day of my life, Clara kept finding ways to make it about her. She made these loud, performative apologies in front of guests, crying dramatically, hugging me in ways I didn't want to be touched. I'm so sorry, she'd say, over and over again, loud enough for everyone to hear, but never once quietly, sincerely, just to me. It wasn't remorse. It was theater. My parents? They whispered at me between speeches and dances. Please forgive her, they said. Don't let this ruin the day. She's your sister. She feels awful. They wanted me to perform, too. To smile, to pretend, to be the bigger person. But I couldn't. I had tried so hard to make that day mine. To create something sacred, beautiful, meaningful. Instead, I spent most of it swallowing tears behind fake smiles, clutching a bouquet with trembling fingers while Clara soaked in attention from relatives, guests, even strangers. I should have been glowing, but I felt hollow. After the wedding, I thought maybe I could finally breathe, that Clara would realize what she'd done and make some kind of genuine effort to fix it. Instead, I got more guilt trips from my family. You need to move past this, they said. She's been crying for days. Don't you think she's suffered enough? Then came a cherry on top. They actually suggested that I make Clara a new dress, as some twisted peace offering, a gesture of goodwill. I said no, and that's when the tide fully turned. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I barely speak to started sending me messages, calling me cold, selfish, unforgiving. The worst of it, Clara's post on social media, a long caption about how some people just can't let go of accidents, paired with a filtered photo of my ruined dress. She wrote that it wasn't even that bad and could totally be fixed. I stared at my phone in disbelief. She'd reduced my pain to aesthetic damage. That night, I blocked her and my parents. Temporarily, I told myself, but something inside me knew this wasn't just about a dress anymore. When we got back from our honeymoon, I found something waiting on our doorstep. A black garbage bag. Inside, stuffed carelessly like garbage, was my wedding dress. No note, no message, no epaulet, just the dress. Wrinkled, broken, forgotten. Seeing it again in the daylight made everything worse. That wine stain? Permanent now. But there was more. Cigarette burns along the side I hadn't noticed before. Delicate lace shredded. Beads dangling by threads. It hadn't just been worn. It had been abused. That was the moment something in me finally snapped into focus. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been disrespected over and over again and expected to take it. So I did what I should have done years ago. I documented everything. Photos of the dress. A written timeline of what happened. Screenshots of Clara's posts, her texts. All the proof that her accident wasn't an accident at all. It was carelessness. Entitlement. Maybe even spite. And then I did something that felt terrifying, but also freeing. I stood up for myself. I wrote a long, painfully honest email and sent it to my entire family. I laid it all out. The years of boundary crossing, the favoritism, the emotional exhaustion. I included the before and after photos of the dress. I shared what Clara had done. Not to shame her. Not for revenge. But because I was done pretending. The responses poured in. Some were stunned. A few cousins who had once taken Clara's side messaged me privately to apologize. They hadn't realized how bad the damage was, or that I had made the dress myself. One cousin even told me that Clara had done similar things to her, but she'd always stayed quiet. But not everyone was willing to face the truth. My mother called me crying, accusing me of humiliating Clara. She said I'd always been jealous of my sister and needed to be the bigger person. My father? He sent a short, cold text. You're tearing this family apart over fabric and beads. Clara never replied directly, but she did tell everyone I was trying to ruin her life, that I'd always hated her, that I was lying. And yet for the first time in my life, I didn't crumble under their guilt. I was finally standing on my own side. just when I thought I had absorbed all the betrayal I could. I learned something new, something that cut deeper than I ever expected. My grandmother called me. She's always stayed neutral, careful not to choose sides in family drama. But that day, she broke her silence. She told me she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. And then, in a soft, almost broken voice, she said something I'll never forget. "Ava," she said, "there's a lace veil, an antique one. It was meant for you. I didn't even know it existed." It had belonged to her mother, my great-grandmother. It was delicate and historic, and carried through generations to be worn by the next bride in our family. It was supposed to be mine, but my mother had given it to Clara months ago, without telling me. I sat there in stunned silence, the phone shaking in my hand. Not only had Clara stolen and destroyed my handmade wedding dress, she had also worn my family heirloom. A piece of history, a legacy meant for me. It felt like a final erasure. Like my place in this family had quietly been handed to her a long time ago, and no one thought I deserved to know. When I told my husband, he wrapped me in his arms and said something simple, something steady. "We'll create our own traditions, our own heirlooms. Starting now." We took what was left of the dress, what scraps we could salvage, and placed them in a shadow box. A quiet monument, not just to the dress, but to my boundaries, to what I'd finally started to protect. Since then, I've distanced myself. I've kept minimal contact with my parents. No contact with Clara at all. Therapy has helped. So has time. And so has finally choosing me. Some relatives still try to pressure me to fix it for the sake of family. But I've stopped playing that role. Because this isn't just about a dress, or a veil, or one ruined wedding. This is about decades of having my voice silenced, my feelings minimized, my boundaries erased in the name of sisterhood. And I won't be that version of me anymore. It had been quiet for a few weeks. Too quiet. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from someone I never expected to hear from. Clara's fiancé. He asked to meet for coffee. Said he had questions. That something wasn't adding up. I was hesitant. My husband insisted on coming with me, just in case. So we went, and I braced myself. What I didn't expect was how quickly the truth began to unravel. Her fiancé looked exhausted. Confused, like someone just waking up from a long, uncomfortable dream. And then he said the words that made my stomach twist. "Clara told me you offered her the dress." My jaw dropped. He continued. She had told him that I gave her permission, then changed my mind out of jealousy. She claimed the damage was minor, that I was exaggerating to make her look bad. But after reading the family email I had sent, with all the photos, all the proof, he began to question everything. And then he started telling me things. Clara had been secretly pulling money from their shared savings. Lied about losing her job. She'd actually been fired for stealing from her workplace. And the worst part? She had maxed out a credit card he didn't even know existed in his name. He looked completely shaken. "You were right," he said. "And I'm sorry. I had no idea." By the end of our meeting, the weight of it all had settled on him. And he said something I'll never forget. "I think I need to reevaluate everything." 3 days later, it happened. Claire showed up at my front door. Hysterical. Her engagement was over. He called it off. Told her to move out. She had nowhere to go. She screamed at me through the door, blaming me for everything, saying I was jealous, bitter, heartless, that I owed her a place to stay. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called the police. When they arrived, Clara still refused to leave. And in one last dramatic gesture, she grabbed a flower pot from our porch and smashed it straight through our front window. They took her to my parents' house. And that was when the real war began. After the police escorted Clara away, I sat in silence, staring at the shattered glass on my floor. Not just a broken window, a symbol of everything that had finally cracked open in my life. It didn't take long before my phone lit up, text after text, call after call. Not from Clara, from my parents. They were furious. "You destroyed her life," my mother hissed over the phone. "You turned her fiancé against her." My father demanded I pay for the canceled wedding. The venue, the flowers, Clara's dress, not mine, hers. They insisted it was all my fault, that if I had just forgiven her, kept quiet, been a good sister, none of this would have happened. It was so surreal, I almost laughed. I said no, and for once. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't argue. Just no. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. Clara's now ex-fiancé started telling his side of the story. To everyone. His family. Their mutual friends. People who had known Clara only from her carefully constructed, social media perfect persona. And suddenly, things started coming out. Stories, rumors, proof. People began to speak up about money that had gone missing after parties. Expensive items borrowed and never returned. Clara lying about her job, her education, even her friendships. People who used to defend her started falling silent. Others reached out to me privately. One of my aunts, my mom's own sister, called me and said, "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. We all saw how she was treated like a fragile doll. I just didn't want to rock the boat." She even offered to talk to my parents on my behalf, to help mediate. But I wasn't sure I wanted mediation anymore. Something had shifted, not just in the family. In me, I no longer felt the need to explain my pain to people who refused to feel it. And for the first time, I started choosing peace over approval. Weeks passed. Clara stayed with my parents, sulking in the guest room like a wronged princess in exile. According to my aunt, she refused to work, refused to contribute, and spent most days venting online about being betrayed by family. But the real shock came when I received an unexpected email. It was from my mother, and it wasn't rage-filled or guilt-tripping. It was hesitant, quiet, almost uncertain. She admitted, maybe, just maybe, they had been too lenient with Clara. Then trying to protect her, they had overlooked patterns, habits that were now impossible to ignore. Then she asked me to meet for lunch. I agreed cautiously, in a public place. The conversation was strained at first, emotional, awkward. My mother looked older, somehow, like years of denial had finally caught up to her. Then she told me something I didn't see coming. Clara had stolen her credit card, charged thousands before they caught it. She also admitted that several family heirlooms had quietly gone missing from their home over the past year. Pieces my mother now believed Clara had sold. For money, for convenience, for attention. I asked her why. Why had they always taken Clara's side? Why was I expected to be the strong one, the forgiving one, while she faced no consequences? My mother grew defensive at first. Then she broke down. She told me that when Clara was a toddler, she had nearly died. Multiple surgeries, terrifying nights, years of fear that they'd lose her. It had traumatized them. And when she finally got better, they overcompensated, protected her too much, excused everything. They never learned to stop. That revelation hit me harder than I expected. Not because it justified Clara's actions, but because it explained the why. Still, I told my mother the truth. Understanding the past doesn't erase the damage it caused in the present. I told her I needed time, that I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. To my surprise, she nodded. She didn't push. My father hasn't contacted me directly, but my aunt says he's changed too. Quiet, angry, no longer defending Clara with the same blind loyalty, setting boundaries that had never existed before. And Clara? She's struggling. She got a job at a retail store, lasted 2 weeks. Fired. No one knows why. She's telling anyone who will listen that I ruined her life, that I turned our parents against her, that I'm out to get her. But no one's buying the act anymore. Not like they used to. After the window smashing incident, I knew I couldn't keep hoping Clara would just stop. She wouldn't. Not unless someone finally made her. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I filed for a restraining order. Walking into that courtroom, I felt terrified, but also something else calm. Because for once, I wasn't reacting. I was protecting myself. The judge listened. He read the police report, saw the photos, reviewed the social media posts and history of emotional harassment. And, without hesitation, he granted a 1-year restraining order. Clara was legally forbidden from coming within 100 yards of my home or workplace. But instead of taking that as a wake-up call, she did what she always does, flipped the story. She launched a GoFundMe. She wrote that she was homeless, abandoned by her family, and needed money for a fresh start. Painted herself as a victim of cruel betrayal. People actually donated, friends, old classmates, even a few extended family members. Until the truth came out. Someone who knew she was living comfortably in my parents' guest room reported the fundraiser. It was shut down. Every donor refunded. And the fallout hit hard, even for my parents. They were humiliated. For the first time, they couldn't defend her. They had a blowout argument with Clara. My aunt said it ended with my father shouting at her, telling her to get a job and stop blaming everyone else for her mess. It was the first real boundary he'd ever set with her. And maybe the beginning of his own reckoning. 2 weeks later, I got another email from my mother. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest thing yet. She said she was starting to see things more clearly, that she realized they had enabled Clara's behavior for too long, that maybe it wasn't fair how they treated me. She asked to meet again, just to talk. This time, I didn't say no, But I didn't say yes right away, either. Because forgiveness, like healing, doesn't happen on someone else's timeline. And for once, mine is the only one that matters. Life started getting quieter. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet, peaceful. My husband and I settled into a rhythm that felt like fresh air after years of chaos. No more emergency calls. No more guilt-tripping texts. No more walking on eggshells. Just mornings filled with soft light, shared coffee, and the healing kind of silence that only comes after you finally shut a door that should have been closed long ago. Therapy helped me understand something crucial. I had spent most of my life playing a role. The peacekeeper, the forgiver, the one who held her breath while everyone else crossed lines. But not anymore. I joined a local sewing guild, a quiet little group of creatives who share patterns, laughter, and stories over cups of tea. People who don't know my family's drama, who don't expect me to fix anyone, just fellow artists, stitchers, makers. And for the first time since the wedding, I started creating again. Not dresses, not for anyone else, just little things, soft, beautiful things. For me, I even started a small online shop, selling handmade accessories. At first, it was just a distraction, but then orders started coming in, custom requests, kind messages, compliments on the craftsmanship. For the first time, I felt seen for something that wasn't connected to being Clara's sister. Just Ava. But even as I moved forward, pieces of the past still found their way back to me. Through whispers, updates from relatives, screenshots, rumors. Clara hadn't changed, not really. She was telling people I'd turned everyone against her, that I stole her life, that I forced our parents to choose sides. But they're not choosing the way they used to. In fact, they've stopped asking me to fix things altogether. They now see Clara separately. They don't even bring her up when we speak. We have monthly dinners now, just the three of us. Me, my mother, and my father. And it's awkward, and quiet, and fragile. But it's real. They don't pressure. They listen more. They let me talk. And for the first time, I think they're starting to understand who I really am. Not the strong one. Not the jealous sister. Just a daughter who was tired of being hurt. It happened 3 months ago. A phone call from my aunt, her voice shaking. Clara's been arrested. Not rumors. Not gossip. Real. Credit card fraud. Identity theft. She had been opening credit lines in our parents' names for months. The final straw? She tried to take out a loan in my father's name. The bank flagged it. Call my dad. And this time, he didn't cover for her. He pressed charges. Clara was arrested. Released only under the condition she attend a court-mandated rehabilitation program. Therapy. Monitoring. Accountability. My mother told me, quietly, that Clara had been diagnosed with several disorders. Things that, in some ways, helped explain her erratic, self-centered behavior. But they didn't excuse it. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a pattern that had spiraled so far out of control, it now had legal consequences. And finally, my parents couldn't look away anymore. They stopped trying to protect her. Stopped making excuses. And, slowly, something shifted. My mother reached out again. This time with something I didn't expect. A gesture. A return. My father had tracked down a pawn shop in town. The same one where, months earlier, Clara had sold something of mine. A small velvet box. Inside were a pair of antique earrings. My grandmother's. The ones meant for me, but given to Clara. Just like everything else. He bought them back. He gave them to me with no fanfare. No speech. Just a quiet moment at the dinner table, his hands slightly shaking as he placed the box in front of me. I should have done this a long time ago, he said. I failed you. And for the first time in my life, my father apologized. Not just for the dress. Not just for Clara. For everything. For asking me to always be the strong one. For choosing silence over fairness. For turning a blind eye when I needed him to see. That night, something in my heart softened. Not healed, not yet. But cracked open, just enough to lend the possibility of rebuilding. Not with Clara. That bridge is gone. Burned. Turned to ash. But with my parents, maybe, just maybe. Let me know when you're ready for part 13, where we move toward closure, healing, and a future Ava finally begins to shape on her own terms. Ban to NOI. Continue ChatGPT to NOI. Here's part 13, where healing begins to take root, and Ava finally reclaims her narrative, building something beautiful from the ashes. Emotional, reflective, and perfect for your TDS voiceover flow. Studio Microphone Part 13. A new life, a new legacy, and letting go of the old. It's been a year since the wedding dress incident. 12 months since Clara took something sacred, tore it apart, and left me with a pile of broken lace and 1,000 unanswered questions. But today, I'm no longer holding the same grief. I've turned it into something else. There's something I haven't shared yet, something that's changed everything. I'm pregnant. Our first child is due in the spring. And with every flutter, every ultrasound, every whispered dream, I felt something inside me realign. This child, this new life is my second chance. Not just to be a mother, but to create the kind of family I never had. One rooted in respect, honesty, and love that doesn't ask me to sacrifice myself to keep the peace. When I told my parents, my mother cried. Tears that felt different this time. Not manipulative, not performative, real. She asked if they could be involved, if I was ready to let them in. And for once, I got to decide. We started setting boundaries early. They don't argue. They don't guilt trip. They listen. And honestly, that means more to me than any apology. As for Clara, she's still under court monitoring, and the restraining order is still in place. There's no contact, and I plan to keep it that way. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. Some stories end before the final page is written. But the most healing thing I've done since all of this was with the dress. For months, I kept it in that black garbage bag. Couldn't look at it. Couldn't touch it. I hated what it had become. A symbol of everything I lost. But then one day, I decided it couldn't end that way. With help from my sewing guild, I took what fabric I could salvage and I transformed it. I turned my ruined wedding dress into a christening gown. Tiny, delicate, soft like hope, with just enough lace to honor what it once was. And with the leftover pieces, I stitched a memory quilt, woven with bits of that dress, old birthday ribbons, scraps from my graduation scarf, a corner from my first ever sewing project. A patchwork of my life, of my story. Because that's the thing about fabric, about pain, about healing. You don't erase what happened. You stitch around it. You mend the seams. That's something new. Create beauty where there was damage. 1 year later, I can finally say it. I'm free. Not just from Clara, but from the silence, from the guilt, from the weight of being the understanding daughter who was expected to bend so others didn't break. I've learned something that should have been obvious, but took me 30 years to believe. Family isn't just blood. Family is respect. Family is safety. Family is earned. I've spent most of my life being told that love meant sacrifice, that being a good sister meant forgiving anything, that being the bigger person meant letting yourself be hurt over and over again. But now I know the truth. Real love has boundaries. And saying no isn't cruelty. It's protection. Today, my life looks different. My parents, well, we're rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, brick by brick, with honesty as the mortar and boundaries as the blueprint. They no longer push for reconciliation with Clara. They've stopped making excuses. They've started listening when I speak. Will it ever be perfect? No, but it doesn't have to be. Because I've stopped chasing perfect. I'm choosing peace. Clara's chapter in my life is over. Whatever path she walks from here, it's not mine to follow. Not mine to fix. I wish her healing. I really do. But from a distance. A very long one. And as for me, I'm building a future I never thought I'd have. With a partner who respects me. A baby on the way. A business that lets me create joy with my own 2 hands. And a heart that finally feels whole. If you follow my story, thank you. Your words, your support, your belief in me. It mattered more than I can say. In a world where I was constantly told I was too much, too cold, too unforgiving, you reminded me I was simply human and worthy. So to anyone out there who has been told to shrink, to keep the peace at the cost of your own, to forgive without apology, to give and give until you're empty, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone access to your life. You're allowed to walk away. From chaos, from guilt, from that's just how they are. You're allowed to choose you. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to break the cycle and start your own. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.